So we're about to move on to our final part of our pen pouch, which is blanket stitch around the edging. So blanket stitch is a really pretty stitch, but it's also very, very secure, and it's used to join two pieces of fabric together. So we're using it to join the two sides of our work together. So what you need to do is you need to fold over your work, making sure that these, we call these the raw edges, they're the edges that aren't joined to anything else, that they line up next to each other. And I'm just going to press it down nice and flat. Okay, I'm going to start in the bottom corner, and then we're going to work our way up, and we're going to stop up at the top by the button. When you do your first stitch, so I've tied my knot in the bottom, again 3 or 4 knots because it's a structural stitch, and it's holding those things together, so it needs to be strong. To get my needle off my magnet, and we're going to bring our needle through one layer. Okay, this way the knot is going to be hidden on the inside. Now I've still got my pen marks on my thumb, so I can keep a nice even stitch length around my pen pouch. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm putting my needle inside my pen pouch, and I'm going to bring it out about here. So I'm just going to show you. That means that my stitches are going to be about this deep, okay, which is a good length to have them. So now you can see that I've got nothing on the back because the knot is hidden in the middle. Makes your work look that little bit neater. So what I'm going to do is hanging my thread over, oh, cat hair, hanging my thread over the top of my work, I'm going to bring my needle round the back. I'm going to come out in the same place that my stitch at the front has come out. And if I pull really slowly so I don't tangle my thread, you'll see that you make a loop. So before you pull it all the way, you're going to put your needle through this loop. And it's quite, we're going to see lots of hands in the air while you're doing this, because you're going to pull your stitch really slowly but up nice and high until you get to the end. And you can give it a tug and it will tighten up those parts there. That's our first stitch. It's our foundation stitch. So it's pulled nice and tight, and you can see it goes over the top and round the back. So using my thumb guide, I'm going to, right, I know I want to bring my needle out about here. Okay, it's roughly, I can check that when I'm pulling it out, it's at the same depth just by holding my thread across, and that's roughly where I want it to be. So I'm actually trying to send my needle up to the ceiling. I'm pointing up to the ceiling, but I'm watching my loop so it doesn't disappear. And just before it disappears, okay, we're going to put our needle through the loop. Just grab it on the other side. And again, start pointing your needle up towards the ceiling. Just be careful of your learning partner, please. And you can see what's happening here. It's looping around the top. So I'm just going to really gently tug, tug, tug. Okay, and I can see that I've got a piece of thread looped over the top, and I've got my stitch on the back. So we can't see the full effect just yet, but we're getting there. So I'm going to do another stitch. I'm going to come out using my little guide. Yep, that's roughly where I want it. Bringing my thread through and putting my needle through the loop. Tug, tug, tug. Again, you can see if I pull it too tight, it almost disappears. If you do pull it too tight, you just use your needle, put it under the stitch and give it a little wiggle. Okay, and then you can almost go back and make sure that your thread's not too tight. So now we're starting to see the effect. I've come through, I've got my loop there, going through my loop. Now this is one of those stitches that you will either get on with or you really won't get on with. If this stitch is proving to be too stressful to do, okay, have a practice. Remember, this is just a practice piece of work. you can always use running stitch or back stitch to join your piece of work. I'd probably recommend back stitch if you're confident with that one because it's stronger, but running stitch will also work as well if that's the stitch you're most comfortable with. So don't panic. This is a tricky stitch, but remember, actually, if this ends up looking completely wonky and ridiculous, that's okay. My first pieces of sewing were all completely wonky and ridiculous, and I love them for it. Okay, it's a good thing to be slightly wonky. Okay, so I'm coming through, making my loop. So what I should say, sorry, is that when we're doing this stitch, you always start from behind. Now I'm at a corner now, so I'm putting my stitch, I haven't left quite the same amount of gap, but I'm pulling it through and I've just tilted my work slightly because I want this bit of thread to lie across the corner. Just like that. Okay, so now I'm just making sure my work's all lined up. Now I'm starting along this part, so I'm going from behind, coming out at in the same depth of the stitch there, and then I just keep going through that loop. So I've gone around my corner and you can see that's worked there. Okay, blanket stitch will go round corners. So you're just going to keep carrying on. If it's more helpful to you to have your stitch markers on the end of your thumb, that's fine. Just make sure you're not getting ink on your thread because we've got nice white thread. But it shouldn't show up on the grey felt. Okay, just pulling it tight but not too tight. And a good blanket stitch will be a similar width the whole way along. It'll be nice and even. If you do accidentally pull that tight, again, it doesn't matter. Okay, you just need to turn it over and loosen it up with your needle just to bring that loop up again, and then you can go through it. And you'll find that as you go, you'll get into a rhythm and you'll get quicker and quicker. You do need quite a long piece of thread for this work. Okay, so I will leave you to finish that row of stitching.